Thank you so much. Welcome to Lunch and Learn, sponsored Le'iloi Nishmat Abraham Mashiach Bar Yitzchak B'ezrat Hashem. The neshama should have an epic aliyah in Shamayim. Every word of Torah that we share here and virtually to all of you, thank you so much for joining in. And B'ezrat Hashem should give you the zechut to perpetuate many more mitzvot in this world. You know, it's actually going to be the topic of what we discussed today. Why? Because this week's Parashat Bo, maybe the most famous Ramban of them all, that Hashem only did everything that He did. Lema'an shiti ototai ele bekirbo uleman tesaper ba'oznei bincha uben bincha. All of this was done not for the benefit of Egypt. They're consigned to the pages of history, you know, as the perpetual losers, right? But it's leman tesaper ba'oznei bincha uben bincha. It's all for you, so that you and I should be able to speak to our children, and you should know vidatem ki ani Hashem. This was the precursor to Kabbalat Torah, for us accepting this mission that takes us through till the end of time. This unbelievable opportunity that with our finite hands we get to touch the infinite. This happened, the preparation for it was now. And we're going to point out one or two more subtle points, maybe one or two more deep questions that I saw so much on this week's parasha as I begin to prepare earlier and earlier in the week nowadays, right? Because Baruch Hashem, together here in this room, we've covered so many topics over the years, and even though in Chadash Tachat Hashemesh, we have to remember the most important principles of them all. Remember that everything that happens is happened because Hashem is orchestrating it such. And even though you and I can't always make sense of what's happening, particularly in the moment, and maybe this is what's going to be the takeaway from today's shiur, and I certainly would like that to be, that as Hashem orchestrates what looks like chaos in the world, your mission doesn't change. My mission doesn't change. Remember the story last week of the man standing in line, in passport control in Paris? And he thinks to himself, but what does Hashem want from me right now? I know I have this thing, and I think I'm going to be even doing another mitzvah. But Hashem is redirecting my focus and saying, excuse me, there's a Jew here who needs your help. We have to be thinking of that. And the Ramban writes very clearly on this week's parasha that if you and I can acknowledge these awesome miracles, which of course we have to be able to do. The death of the firstborn, how a lice doesn't creep from over one certain line, how the blood doesn't affect a person drinking from the same cup of water, but it affects it. It's clear there's God running this world. There's no getting out of it. But if you are modeh, if you and I can admit and acknowledge in the big miracles a deeper analysis upon deeper thought, you have to accept also that Hashem is running the minutiae of this world as well. And therefore concludes the Ramban, Ein Teva. There is no such thing as nature. Yes, this is where Hashem wishes to remain anonymous. He lets the world run. But it's your job and my job to find Hashem. And that's why tefillah is so crucial. So crucial. It's our moment of meditation to stop in the day that doesn't stop pinging and making us busy and making us occupied. Bothers me a lot. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm going to. Bothers me a lot how many times people are bothered during tefillah. Something pings and the phone comes out. Maybe a thought. As the phone comes out mid tefillah, what? It's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Right? Isn't there a lovely fellow in Gibraltar, Hawkeyes, right? Stephen, what's his name? He goes up the rock every day and he says some blessing, good morning to everybody. But do you know, as a non-Jew, he's so enamored by the Jewish faith that he puts away his phone every Friday night. And he switches it off and he says to his family, I'm not communicable with until Saturday sundown. Amazing.
Who is it?
I can't remember. Reyes, I think. Neil Hayes, right? He's called Hawkeyes. Hawk or something like that. He goes up the rock every single day and he says, good morning, campo de Gibraltar. Por la mañana, good morning to everybody. Wakey, wakey, goes up the rock. And he's full of blessing. I'll tell you his job. Maybe I shouldn't say this so long. He's the guy who does. He's on charge. Makes sure all the garbage, refuse things gets collected. He goes around making sure that the refuse is. He's in that. But he's a spiritual person. Listen, I think there's a tremendous amount of good to be said about it. But what's the point of Shabbat? He chaps it. He gets it. The point of Shabbat is to not be so shakua and stuck in this world that we forget what our mission is. That's what Shabbat is for us. The one and only Almighty Creator. Let's get it clear. The zemirot that we sing, the meals that we have, it's about focusing on. It's not about talking sports and politics. It's not about saying, wow, fantastic, I don't have to go to work today. No. But to connect with what our deeper mission is. And that really is the whole art of what we're doing here. And there's a number of points that I want to draw out, but of course I've got to get to my stories also, otherwise you won't invite me back. I appreciate, by the way, everybody who committed and does continually commit to come. I understand that there was a possibility of maybe doing it with another rabbi a little earlier, and I saw the overwhelming support for this shiur, and it touched me very much. It's not my shiur, by the way, anyone's free to come and speak, but it's my zechut that most weeks I get the zechut, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful. Also, I would like to say also a deep and grateful thanks to all those people who tune in to the Shmirat HaLashon 2 minutes every single day. I think it's our 7th cycle that we finished. So if you join me for just 2 minutes a day, we've finished the entire book of Shmirat HaLashon Chafetz Chaim in just 2 minutes a day. And for those of you who are not yet joined, and people on YouTube, you can more than well reach out. I'm more than happy for you to join. It goes out every single day, God willing. And just for a couple of minutes a day, in 128 days, you finish the entire Sefer Shmirat HaLashon, about which the Chafetz Chaim said, by the way, unless you revise it daily, you don't have a hope of getting close to keeping these laws well. Okay? So, and many people reached out and thanked again on this, on the last completion we finished just a few days ago. Great time to sign up, by the way, we're right, just at day 3 or 4, so fantastic. But anyhow, Rabbi Roberts discusses this week's parasha and his beautiful view on how things unfold in this week's parasha teaches us how we're supposed to look at the world. Because the pasuk commands us that ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li. What's this ba'avur zeh? We tell our children, because of this, Hashem did this to me. What's this? So Rashi writes, ba'avur zeh, Pesach, matzah, maror. Because of this, we're talking to our children and we're saying, because of this, Hashem did this to me. In other words, Rabbi Rucham says, we don't do mitzvot because we were taken out of Mitzrayim. That's not what. It's the scenario of Egypt was created so that we get to keep the mitzvot. You see the subtlety? It's not because Mitzrayim happened, that's why we're eating matzah. We're going to dig down into this a bit. But rather, the whole scenario of Hashem setting up this whole piece of history is so that you and I get to enjoy some indigestion for a week. Every so often, I shouldn't say it like that. It's such spiritual food. And the Chafetz Chaim, we just mentioned the Chafetz Chaim, he mentions this idea in the guise of a mashal. He says a parable. He says, imagine our earthly existence is compared to a king. And the king had a beloved child. And he had to send his child away on a mission. His child needed to accomplish what he needed to do. And the mission was in a very far away, a distant land, and it was therefore necessary for the son to wear very different clothing. The clothing was coarse. He had to eat extremely crude food, and he had to deal with, let's say, a rather unrefined clientele, right? The people around him weren't his necessarily, what he was. And so how could a father, loving father, send his son away to such a base and coarse environment? And the answer is clearly that the child's experience there will give him the necessary equipment, the necessary tools. He would be able to be afforded opportunities of growth that weren't afforded to him, that weren't possible for him when he was sitting in the throes of the luxury of the palace. That's the only reason why the father would do that. And says the Chafetz Chaim, it's exactly the same thing with us. Elokai neshama shenetata bi tehorahi. What is the real you? The real you is definitely not the physical cloak around your neshama. It's not. The real you is your neshama. That's why it's eternal. The body may conk out at some point and will die, but Hashem will do tchiyat hamitim. The neshama doesn't die, it lives on. And the neshama, which will live on and does live on, and lives on through us, through these words of Torah. It's amazing. I saw a beautiful vort. I can't say it now. But we say, the Zohar says, I'll say it really quickly, but it's based on the locusts in this week's Parshat. Don't ask me why, later maybe I could tell you, right? But the Zohar tells us that, at a family simcha, the neshamot of our loved ones, they come and celebrate. I know it's always an easy thing. Rabbis say it, I'm sure, many, many times as a singer, I've been there where people have recently been bereaved. I sang at a chuppah for somebody's second marriage who 6 days earlier his father passed away. Can you imagine the emotion? And the rabbi poignantly and beautifully said, I know it, your father is with us, singing, smiling. How does the rabbi know? So the truth is, it's a Zohar. If anybody is interested, I can show you the makor for it, maybe chapter, line, and verse. But I always wondered why. Why? They come to birthday parties? Why? And I saw an explanation this year that I've never seen before, and I found it fascinating. Based on the idea that the same Tichiyat HaMetim happened in Egypt for the Egyptians during the plague of locusts. Because the Pasuk says, your ancestors have never seen such a thing. They didn't see it, they're dead. Says the Zohar, no, they came back to life, and they came and they witnessed the terror and the downfall. And I saw a beautiful explanation. Do you know, a machshava tova, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitztaref l'maseh. For a Jew, if you think and decide you're going to do something good, even if it does not transpire, it gets on your account in Shamayim, your spiritual account, it's yours. You did it. You decided that you're going to do something good, so it's there for you. And you get to reap the rewards of that. For non-Jews, the same could also be true in the negative. Correct? Anti-Semitism doesn't make any sense. Why do they come after us? You know what they ingrained in their children and their grandchildren? To hate the Jew, So when it comes time to reap the fruits of what that was, Hashem brings the neshama back and says, there you go. You can see what you sowed. The same is true when a beautiful Jewish couple walk down to a chuppah. The grandparents belong there. Do you know why? Because it was only the perpetuation. This is the perpetuation of the seeds that they sowed. The father who so lovingly brought up the child. The mother who so lovingly brought a child into this world to do what? To make a home and an abode, a place of where Hashem is going to be real in this world. Every time a mother lovingly sings Shema with a child, right? Every load of laundry, every meal, it's another brick in a successful being. A home of where Hashem is real. It's unbelievable. But let's get back to our point. The King of all kings only sent us, like the parable of the Chavetz Chaim, only sent us to this world. Why? Because in where we were, Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah, sitting there, in Shamayim, underneath Hashem's heavenly throne of glory, there's no mission. There's nothing we can accomplish there. And even though there's no concept of space, but what does it mean in the Mashal where the Chavetz Chaim says Hashem sends the child far away? It talks about dissimilarity. This world is so dissimilar to the world where we come from. And this is a very coarse world, a very base world. And we're stuck here. And the food needed by the body is certainly not the same nourishment that we need in Shamayim. It's not. Right? So why were we here? Clearly the explanation is because we're on a mission. And we can only achieve that mission through this sojourn in this world. And that's why Hashem gives us the opportunity. So now back to our point, says Rabbi Roberts, Hashem engineers history to make sure that we're going to have the opportunities with which to serve Him. Because that's all we're doing here. Right? What does the Pasuk in Tehillim say? Al tira ki yasher ish. Don't be in awe when somebody becomes extraordinarily wealthy. What happened when Trump visited Gibraltar? Oh, the highways are shut down, the roads are shut down, everyone's like, oh, Donald Trump, you're here, Donald Jr., right? Al tira ki yasher ish. Okay, 10 private police cars. Okay. Ki lo b'moto yikach hakol. Yes, maybe Hashem put them here in positions of power, and they have great responsibility, and to that end, the Jewish people are extremely grateful to Donald Trump and for his support for Israel and for the Jewish people. It's astonishing. But don't get hung up on the make of his suit. Who cares about net worth? The Times publishes a rich list. It's not really relevant. What are we doing here? We're doing Hashem engineered all of Egypt just so that we can eat matzah, so to speak. That's how we're supposed to look at it. Mitzvot don't arise from a circumstance like leaving Egypt, rather, in order to present us with the mitzvah. And the mitzvot of what we need to do on Pesach, we went through Egypt. Okay? And by the way, matzah is a great example. You could ask a very simple question of matzah. Why didn't Hashem just give the Jews the message to start packing sandwiches 18 minutes earlier? Yeah? And had they all been having turkey sandwiches, that would be how we'd have a turkey shawarma, right? We'd have a turkey lafa. Mind you, I guess with... at some point we're going to have lamb shawarma, right? When Karban Pesach comes back. But why didn't it happen? Hashem could easily have told us to do it earlier. And the simple answer is there has to be a crucial lesson and something spiritual to be internalized from the matzah. And I saw Rabbi Roberts write something amazing. So why do we have to eat matzah? And he writes like this, and I'll try and summarize it because I want to move on to a new point, which is phenomenal. After 210 years of the worst Holocaust history had seen, the Jewish people were about to go free. And by the way, it's natural for any person who was in that to breathe a sigh of relief and think to themselves, "Phew, amazing that we got through it." And can you imagine the people just dreaming of a little bit of a holiday? Dreaming a bit of some beach somewhere, maybe the early hours of the morning, not a soul in sight, maybe a cool drink in hand, and just think, after all of those years of the whipping and the torture and the backbreaking, endless pain and needless labor, it wasn't for anything. It was so soul-destroying. Can you imagine the person thinking, I would love just a week off, and maybe longer, right? What did Hashem do? Right at that moment, Hashem had us eating matzah. As if to say, says Rabbi Roberts, like this, and I'll paraphrase it. You weren't placed in Mitzrayim and then taken out in order to have an easy or a relaxing life. That's not what you were there for. You're leaving from an oppressive bondage, from being a mitzvah, a place that was so constricted. You know why? Why it was so constricted? Because it was so addicted to personal pleasure. That's what they were in it for. Black magic, their sexual depravity, their disgusting behavior, interpersonal behavior. I don't want to elaborate more, but you get where I'm going. Where did they end up with all of this lavish freedom, personal freedom, my rights, I could do what I want, my body, right? Does it sound familiar? Where did it end them up? What did it get them in the end? We had to be in it. We had to see it. It was the mitzar, the kur habarza. You get the gold out of the ore in incredible heat. These temperatures rose to the point where only those meriting to come out into a spiritual existence, they came out of this kur habarza of Mitzrayim. Where did we go to? El Eretz Tova Urechava. After 40 years in the desert, we go to a land which the Torah describes as broad. Any of you who own a map will know that that tiny sliver on a global map called Israel is anything but broad. Right? It's so narrow, it's so tiny. What are we talking about? Mitzrayim, which was so vast, is called mitzar, constricted, because a person who's addicted to personal pleasure is constricted. They're nowhere, they're going nowhere. But the person who is spiritually free is so broad, is so big, sees so far beyond what's happening here. We're starting to see what's happening. Says Rabbi Roberts, you leave this oppressive bondage under a selfish king to an incredibly rewarding life, to serve the most magnanimous king. This is our privilege. Ashreinu, matov chelkeinu. This is who we are. Now, at times you can serve Hashem, and the environment is very pleasing. The environment can become comfortable, conducive to great service, but at other times, your environment is going to be harsh. It's going to be demanding. Your relationship with Hashem is going to be forced to go through some hardships. The food at that very onset, at those light-headed moments of, yay, we're free, was matzah. Matzah is supposed to teach us that we're not here for just some comfortable, easy ride. It's here to teach us what we're doing here. You could view the mitzvah honoring parents as a in a very similar way. On a simple level, parents are here, they give life to their children, and the children have to therefore show appreciation. But again, it's a reversed view of the situation. No, Hashem felt it necessary that in order for us to relate to Him properly, we have to experience a relationship where we've got an obligation of gratitude. So Hashem gives us parents for that. It's the other way around. And this is the way to view everyday events. It's a whole new perspective. It's a whole new perspective. That everything that we go through, it's tailor-made for our spiritual navigation through to X marks the spot. At every single juncture, Hashem is talking to us. And because time is late, I'm going to skip what I was going to say here. If there's time, I'll come back to it. But I'll relate to you a couple of stories that highlight this. The Rebbe of Zvil, by the way, he said, and I wrote down his quote, I love it. He says, for every step a person takes on behalf of other people in this world, you're saving yourself 1,000 steps. In other words, every time we're asked to do something, even though it looks like we're sacrificing and we're giving it's really for you, there's no version of living life here just for you, if you understand your spiritual mission. Of course, there are things we naturally need to do to self-preserve. We all need to earn money to be able to live. You need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to rest. There's so many things. But you can't just eat because food is good. That can't be why Hashem put food here. It can't be. And at every juncture, we have to realize Hashem's put me in this situation because He wants something from me. So let me tell you a couple of stories that I saw. This is an amazing story that I saw from Rabbi Amram Binet. And he writes the story, he publishes the story, and he says that he personally knows the person it happened to. And I have two stories like this, but if I have time, one more as well, okay? There was a fellow who moved to Israel, and he was a maverick type businessman, took risks, etc. And he started his business by looking at what Israel was good at, what he could export, and what he could bring from abroad to sell in Israel. And he started this import-export. There was no method to his madness. He just looked at the market and he kept assessing. And he took risks, and obviously he went out on some major expenses to start with, but he became quite successful quite quickly. And he was 20 years in business, being quite lavish and quite successful. And obviously some months he made a lot more, other months not as much. But he was clever with his funds, and he saved a rainy day fund, and etc. And he got known quite quickly in his neighborhood as the guy who, he's a big businessman. He's doing big stuff. Okay. And as successful as he was, this man maintained a schedule as best he could. And one of his schedule highlights was his nightly shiur. He went from his own neighborhood to a nearby neighborhood to pray Arvit. And there he went to a shiur from his beloved Magid shiur, a person who wowed the crowds and somebody who was eloquent. And he said, this is my spiritual lifeline. I need this. This fellow is for me. I'm not missing the shiur no matter how busy my day gets, no matter how crazy and how early it starts. This is my nightly, voyage into my spiritual journey in life. I'm not missing it. And of all the successful business friends that I have, the ones who make their learning and their growth, their spiritual growth, part and parcel of their day, they're the successful ones. Materially and spiritually. And you should know every single day, somebody else from his neighborhood, a close by neighbor, would come to him and say, do you mind if I grab a lift? Right? Not everyone in Israel has a car. In fact, many, many people in Israel don't have cars. Cars in Israel are very expensive. Expensive to buy, expensive to run. And this fellow, who would normally take the bus, now found this, and what happened became a daily ritual. Every single day when he was about to leave for the shiur, same time, every evening, there was his neighbor, please can I have a lift? And every day, absolutely, please, with pleasure, no problem. Okay. And this went on for year after year after year after year. After about 20 years in business, this guy started to fall on hard times. Things changed. He wasn't as successful as he was before. He tried to think and analyze why, and that he couldn't get to grips with what was happening. And his rainy day fund was gone, and he was slipping into debt. And even though he was going through difficult times, he thought, but I'm not giving up on my daily shiur. There's no way that's going to happen. Every night he would go, much harder for him to focus, harder to concentrate. And it came time for him to pay back a loan that he had taken to try and rescue his business. And he had a $50,000 debt that he needed to pay. And every day that crept closer to payment date was a day that was hard for him to breathe. It was really tricky. And about a day or two before he had to repay this money, he started to resent this guy asking for a favor every day. He really did. And he had to internally think to himself, look, why do I have to give him a free ride every day? He could take the bus also. Sometimes I want my own space and da-da-da. And he kept on saying to himself, no, Hashem blessed you with a car. He doesn't have a car. Share the blessing. Go for it. And every day it was harder and harder. And then, on the day that the loan was due, the shiur was very hard for him to focus on, extremely hard. And even though the guy came for the ride, it just bothered him that he came again and again and again. And he decided in the shiur that he just was so distant he couldn't focus on it. And he slipped out the shiur about 10 minutes early. And he went into the dark car park and he just was walking in a haze, in a gloom. There was like this grey cloud in the cartoon over his head, that's how he felt life was. And it's so crushing. For people in financial difficulty, it just grated on him so much that it was wearing him down. And through the dark car park, as he was about to put the key in the lock or unzap the car or whatever it was, the voice from behind him said, oh, I thought I was going to miss you. Do you mind if I have a ride home? The guy followed him out. And for some reason, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And he was ready to explode. And he just kept calm and he said, yeah, sure. Through gritted teeth, he said, yeah, come on. And the guy gets into the car and there's a stony silence. Stony silence. And eventually the guy looked at him, the passenger, and he said to him, I've seen you for the past few days. Like Yosef HaTzadik saw those guys in jail, right? Madua pneichem ra'im hayom. Why do I see you looking depressed today? That kind of happened to him there. And he said, I've been seeing you. And this guy just snapped. And he just snapped. They had just started driving and he snapped and he said, and if I told you, would it make any difference? You're just some hanger-on, some clinger-on. You just come to the same thing. Well, if I told you I'm in massive debt, you're going to save my life? Just leave me alone, so to speak. And the other man, even though there was a bit of an outburst, which was totally unwarranted, the guy was very calm and he was very calculated and he was very measured. And he said to him, you're assuming I can't help? Who says I can't help? And the guy lost it. And he said, really? I need $50,000 by the end of the night. I need to present tomorrow. $50,000. Everyone thinks I'm such a successful guy. It's been going pear-shaped the last few months. I'm in trouble. And extremely calmly, the man said, you still think I can't help? And he was driving and the guy slammed on the brakes in the middle of the road. And he turned to this guy and he said, what? He said, you know exactly where I live. Let's drive to my house. Now hurry up. There's traffic behind you. Come on. And it was like almost a surreal. He didn't understand it. And if this guy's playing him on, that's the worst joke ever. But he knows of this guy as not a man of financial means. He just thought of him every day. That doesn't know him brilliantly, but he just knows he's not a businessman per se. He thinks he's a bit of a teacher or something. He doesn't know what he does 100%. Like, there's no way this guy has $50,000 in cash hanging around. And the fellow drove him to his house and he said, wait here, please. And he came, it's like a mafia movie story, right? He comes out holding a big brown envelope and he says, if you count it carefully, you'll see it's $50,000 exactly in cash. He said, there's no repayment date. He said, you've been good to me for so many years, driving me every single day. I understand you're under pressure. Please God, this should help you and everything should go well. If you can, I would like $1,000 a month to pay back, no interest of course. And if there's certain months that you can't make the monthly payment, don't worry. He said, my ballpark figure in my head is if you could try and give it me back by the end of 6 years from now, I'd be very grateful. And this stunned driver just stammers some kind of a thank you. Don't forget, having just had an outburst. Having just said to me, you can help me, like the most disparaging way possible. And he handed him this envelope, and there it was, $50,000 in cash. And the fellow, as he writes the story, said that it put him back on his feet. He said he never got back to being at the place where he was before, but he's certainly comfortable today. And he's a more measured person today. And he said the story taught him that you never know when you're helping others who you're really helping. He said, imagine I'd have told him no. I'd have slipped out the shiur to try and avoid him. I took him in my car every single day thinking, well, I'm doing him the favor. Trust me, the favor he did to me at the end of all of that was bigger. And I saw a similar story. This is a cracking story. I saw this published in a book that I've recently bought. But this is about something that I can relate to. Okay, there was a certain fellow, we'll call him Menashe. His name wasn't Menashe, but as a pseudonym, we'll call him Menashe Grossblatt, right? He had this Yetzer Hara, with a pinch of salt, for expensive watches. He was a successful businessman, but he had this weakness that when Rolex brought out new watches, he got himself on the list and he would wait for them. Patek Philippe, he was a luxury watch brand guy. And he sometimes felt bad looking back on his collection, why he would spend such vast amounts of money on fine Swiss timepieces. But he just did. And people knew him as a very generous guy, but it was just his one thing. He would literally buy watch magazines and look for the next time this watch is coming out. And right, by the way, today's show has been sponsored by Rolex, just saying, right? So, he was into it. He was really into it. And he was, right? And he had this magazine and he saw that a certain watch was coming out and he called this dealer, which is in Geneva, and he said to him, I want it. How much is this new watch that's coming out? And the fella told him, $60,000. And he felt like a naughty child. He does have the money. He just thought to himself, I'm mad, but I can't say no. And he said, what's the wait list like? He said, well, it's an in-demand piece, right? He said, but if you want to put your name on the list, I know you're a good client. I know we've sold you before. I'll give you the call when you should. It should be about 7 or 8 months. And he said, for real? He takes a deep breath and he thinks, $60,000. Okay, let's do it. And like a naughty little child, he puts his name on the list. And he made a mental note of when that phone call took place. And he was dreaming about the day, 6-7 months from now, when he's going to get the call. Within a window of X number of weeks, he's going to get the phone call and he's going to buy the watch. And as the time crept closer and kept closer, he was looking at the list, he was looking at his diary, etc. And one day his phone buzzes and he sees, and I even know the name of the guy, Franco Gerard was the fellow's name in Geneva. And Franco calls him up and he says, hello, not related to the other Gerards that we know, right? Right? And, sorry? Okay. Right? This guy lived in Geneva and was not from Liverpool, okay? This Mr. Gerard. And he called him up and he said, Mr. Menashe over there, we have your watch. We're ready to ship it to you. If you were to arrange the wire transfer to us, I will give you the shipping FedEx details or whatever, and within a few days you'll be the proud owner of this, I don't know what watch it was, right? And he said, oh, fantastic, I'm excited, thank you so much. Send me through the details where I need to ship, and he hangs up. And he was just dreaming of the day that the FedEx truck comes with a special thing and he has to sign for it. And he gets this little box and he puts this, right? As he hangs up his phone rings straight away again. Straight away. And it's a big Askan, a person who's very involved in community matters. And he calls him up and he says, you're the kind of guy I need right now. there's an emergency situation that's just happened and we need big help, big help. And he goes on to describe how a Jewish family in Israel had a fire in their home, and the home was burnt down to the ground. A proper house in a moshav, somewhere or other, and it burned down to the ground. And he goes on to explain how the family managed to escape the blaze. It happened in the evening, but they got out by the skin of their teeth. Literally, the clothing that they're wearing is the only thing they own now. They lost everything. Family heirlooms, pictures, passports, documents, jewelry. Nothing was saved. So this guy, Menashe, says, but surely insurance? They weren't insured. They had no home insurance. He said, there is a family now that is out on the streets with nothing for their children. And we need somebody to come up big. And I'm calling you because I know you're a big-hearted and a very generous man. And he contrasted the two phone calls. He said, give me a day to think about it. And he contrasted his two phone calls that took place within moments of each other. One to a luxury watch dealer in Geneva to spend $60,000 on, let's face it, he was being honest with himself, a piece that's not necessary at all. Right? As a wise man once pointed out, your £9.99 Casio still tells the time the same way as this 100,000, right? It's the same time. Or literally, I could save a family from going under. And he started to rationalize, other people can help. They can do a tzedakah campaign. Why should it be me? And it was so glaringly obvious to him that Hashem was speaking to him in this moment. The one phone call right next to the other one, he said, it can't be that Hashem wants me to say no and for me to empty my piggy bank for something of pure luxury, unnecessary luxury. And he looked and he thought to himself and he said, I'm going to do the right thing. This is going to sound insane. The next morning he called his brother, Yossi, and he said to him, Yoss, this is what happened to me yesterday. I called Geneva, he went through the whole thing. And he said, but there's this family. And he said, by the way, we have a list of Rabbanim we can call who know the family personally. So we know there's no scam going on. We can go meet the family if we want. We can go and see the house where we can go. He said, if I'm going to give $60,000 to an anonymous family who I've never met before, I want you to match me. Listen to this. His brother in an instant said, you're on. And that afternoon, $120,000 left their bank accounts to go and save a random family that they've never met before. He said, the one thing I forgot to tell you was he didn't want to ruin his reputation with the watch dealer. So he called back Geneva. And he called back Mr. Franco Gerard. And he said to him, I know I've been waiting on the list, but if I decided not to go for the watch right now, for personal reasons, not to spend $60,000 at this moment in time on the watch, does it hurt my chances of getting watches in the future? Does it give me any negative penalty points with you guys? He said, no, absolutely not. We totally understand. There's a long waiting list that we'll just give it to the next person on the list. The minute you want to go back on the list or you want to stay on the list, and we'll keep calling you whenever we have another piece in for you, we could do that. But there's no negative ramifications for you. He said, okay. He hung up, and that's when he called his brother. He said, that 60 is going to go to a total tzedakah case. And that's what happened. That would be fantastic if I finished the story here, because it's a great story. Two random brothers gave $60,000 each to a family they've never met before. But in November of 2016, I don't know if you remember this, but fires broke out all over Israel. Turns out that many of these fires were started in arson attacks. Once the fire broke out, terrorists matched what was happening, etc. And in one particular moshav, by the way, there was a young family who escaped at the last minute. They raced out of their home, they piled into a car, and they were able to outrun the fires. And can you imagine the time that when the fires were under control and were put out, and the families come back to assess the damage? You can just put your heart in their heart. Think about what it might feel like for a father driving up to a home that he put a deposit down and has paid monthly mortgages. Can you imagine? And this family drove back into their moshav to assess the damage when they know that most of their moshav were wiped out. And this father was astonished as he drove up to his house. This same man who saved someone else's house rather than buying himself a luxury watch drove to his house in his moshav, and they took pictures of it. The fire line stopped around the perimeter of his house. Homes on either side of his house were destroyed down to the ground. And his own home was totally spared from the fire. Now, I'm no God, and I'm no malach, and I leave it with you. Do you think that's coincidence? It's up to you to figure out whether you think or not. And by the way, there was no damage by fire, nor by water either, because the Israeli fire authorities were there dousing everything with water. Everything that happens to us, says Rabbi Yerucham, is happening to us because Hashem is guiding us in this world to achieve what we spiritually need to achieve. The quicker we recognize that, the more we put into perspective what happens, the richer we will be for it. The less frustrated, hopefully, we will be, even if those moments, like matzah, where we dream of, are a little coarse and harsh, but it's Hashem speaking to us. Please God, through these difficult times for us, the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, they will get easier, and we will see through them until we have the moments to celebrate Bezrat Hashem with the coming of Mashiach, Bezrat Hashem, together.